one of the applications engineer here at Actify. So everybody should be seeing the SpinFire application window that I have open. So today I will be showing some tips on how to quickly make calculations to your part, such as surface area or volume of a part, and how to quickly do measurements when you're not really sure where to find the specific measurements you need. So for starters, maybe a manufacturer or cost estimator needs to calculate the surface area for anodizing their part or coating a part. So what I'll do is right click on one part here. You'll see as I clicked on that part, you see that part highlighted in yellow in the 3D environment, and you see that part highlighted in the assembly tree. And when I clicked on that part, you see this contextual menu. This contextual menu can, be displayed whether you click on it from the assembly tree structure or from the 3D object. So let's focus on this one part. So I'll right click and click on show only to hide the rest of the assembly, and then focus to bring this into view. You notice when I rotate the model, it might be a little bit off in trying to navigate around this object. So if I right click and select focus, it just changes that center point, that center of rotation. Okay, so to quickly do a calculation of this part for a surface area, I'll right click on this part to bring up this contextual menu and navigate to calculate, select surface area. And now this will calculate basically the skin wrapping of this object for, again, for such as coating this part. And you'll see that this by default is showing 24.5401 inches squared. Now, if I want to change this value, change this units, length units, I can right click on that value, navigate to my units, and maybe I want to switch to centimeters. Now it says 158.3232 centimeters squared. I can also control the number of decimal places by right clicking on this value and going to my decimal places. Maybe I want to change that to 2 decimal places. So now it's 158.32 centimeters squared. So by default, it was 4 decimal places. It was in inches. That information by default is selected up here in this drop-down menu at the top of your toolbar here. So by default, this is in inches, and this is in kilograms. Now to change those options so that you don't have to continuously keep changing the values or the measurement of units or units of measurement, I'll go to my options on the left-hand side here and navigate to settings, 3D viewer. And now under my measurements menu here, this is where you can control the number of decimal places, my length units, my weight units, and control my default material when I want to calculate a weight. And then when I make my changes here, I will select apply settings. And if I jump back to my workspace, you won't see those changes here in this current workspace. That will only, any changes that I make in my options will only affect any new CAD files that I import into SpinFire. Now maybe you need to calculate the weight of this object for transporting your part, loading this part. So again, I'll right click on this part and navigate to calculate weight. Okay. So my weight is by default iron and 0.1101 kilograms. Again, to change my units of measurement, I right click on that value and go to my weights units, and maybe I want to change this to ounces. So now we see that this is 3.8826 ounces. Okay. I can modify the weight, which may have a different density. Maybe I want to change this to steel. 7.85, 7.85, same density. So why don't we just switch to titanium, right? So that automatically changes the material in this value and changes the measurement to, or the weight to 2.2306 ounces. Now, under our options menu, we can actually import our own custom materials by going to this define materials. Again, I jump over to my options, settings, 3D viewer, and then I look for the material setting and select define materials. So to import my own material, I can click on import and navigate to where that text file or XML file, CSV file is located to bring in that name and that density. Another thing that can be done with the materials is changing the density value of the existing materials that are on here. So to do that, I just double click on the value of steel, and I can change this to a different value if I wanted. Maybe I change that to 9.25, and then I would select apply. Okay. And now if I did a calculation, steel. So you see that my steel density value is 7.85. Again, any changes that I make in my options will only take in effect any new CAD file that I import as opposed to my existing workspace. Okay, now maybe you need to calculate the volume of this object. So to simply do that, I'll right click on this part and calculate, navigate to calculate volume. All right, so that we see it as 0.8557 inches cubed. Now maybe you need to understand how much, if I'm ordering this part, how much waste would I have? So to determine that, I want to get the bounding box values for this particular part. And to get that, I'll right click on the part and calculate. Again, I have two options now, minimum bounding box and access align bounding box. I want to calculate my minimum bounding box, and that's going to calculate the minimum amount of material that is required for this block to be created. So it's going to take the XYZ value of this particular block. And you'll see the volume listed here as well in this dialog box that shows you the XYZ values and the volume here. So simply to get the waste, you subtract the bounding box value with the object value. Okay. Now maybe you need to calculate the overall, or the the area of where a part might be being used in an assembly. So I'm going to just go ahead and turn off this bounding box display here under my annotations tab or markups tab. Go back to my assembly, and let's say I want to get just an idea of where this object is positioned in this assembly. So I right click on this part, go to calculate, and let's calculate the axis align bounding box. All right. Now let's show only. You'll notice that the bounding box is really not skin wrapped to this object. It's an object of the overall area based on the XYZ coordinate system of this entire assembly. Again, just to kind of show you the difference with this, if I right click and select calculate minimum bounding box, you would see sort of this difference. And I can even right click on this bounding box and change the color. Instead of black, let's say I want to make this a green color. And so now we can kind of differentiate between the two different bounding boxes for this particular object. Okay, let's turn on the rest of the assembly, and again, I'll show only this particular part. Now, maybe you need to calculate, you need to understand the area that's inside of this object, the side of this block, how much fluid can fill up this object for oil, or how much space do you have here that you can put your engine components inside of this object. So under our measurement tool here, we have this option called boundary volume by surface. So click on that. And now as I hover over this part, I just can start selecting the tube inside, the areas inside of this object. So I'm going to say that there are two different areas of selection. So right now I'm just clicking on the internal areas, right? And it doesn't really matter right now how many, if I try to get every single surface in here, or if I just click on one surface, it's okay if I just click on the one surface. But here I click on two, I'll now go and select the outer edges of this block. And this just kind of blocks all the areas where, let's say, a fluid might be able to escape this object. All right. Now, once you see the rendering of this object change where the exterior areas, the exterior surfaces are transparent and the internal areas are now the solid green, it's ready to be calculated. So I'll go ahead and select calculate in the dialog box. And once that's finished, it will create this tan colored object that highlights all of the internal area of this surface, and it gives you the volume here. It's 1.1848 inches cubed. Okay, next, the next tip we wanted to cover today was how to create how to use some of our smart edge or smart surface dimensioning. So we have a set of many different types of measurements. And it might be confusing on, well, which measurement do I need? Which type do I specifically need? And it might be confusing for the user. So we have these the Smart Edge and Smart Dimension tool, and this just kind of helps to eliminate the number of interaction for the user to try to find these different measurements. So let's start with Smart Edge Dimension. As you see, as I hover over the different areas of this block, you'll see the value, the diameter here, and the XYZ point, center point of that circle or that arc, or the edge length of this part is 1.0236 inches. If I were to right click on this arc, or I'm sorry, I left click on this arc to create this dimension, and then place my value over to the right here. You'll see this XYZ center point here and this value. I can actually hide that arc center point coordinates by right clicking on that value and turning that off. Now maybe I want to measure from edge point to edge point in this object. So I'd have to click on two areas, the left side and right side of this object. So to do that, to click on my first side, I will need to right click. And as I right click on that, you see it turn yellow. And you see this menu appear to allow me to choose which kind of measurement I want. So let's say I want to do minimum distance between edges. So now I can click on that option and then select this other edge. And we see that this is 0.2756 inches. Okay. Another option we have is the Smart Surface Dimension. So let's switch over to that. And as you can see, as I hover over this object, you see that it just kind of changes it shows the draft angle based on the point of where my cursor is. Zoom in, you can see that this angle is 70 degrees, and it's also showing by default, this is going along the z-axis, the pulling direction. I can go here to my Smart Surface Dimension Measurement dialog and change my pulling direction. Maybe I want to change my pulling direction to along the y-axis. And now you see that the pulling directions, now this green arrow going to the right is the positive y direction. You see that this is showing at 20 degrees. And if I wanted to lock this down and just add this measurement here, I'll click on that and place my value. And now I have the angle measurement displayed here. Maybe I want to get the minimum distance between two surfaces between this side of this object to this side of the object. So what I'll do again, since I'm clicking on two different sides, I have the first side, I have to right click, and that brings up this menu of what kind of measurement I could do that it gives me. I'll say minimum distance between two surfaces, and then rotate my model to the side of the object and just click on this side. And you see that it's 1.7913 inches. Another clean way to display this measurement. Maybe I want to have it look more of a 2D print, and this is kind of going at an angle and it looks bad. So I can right click on that and change this value to, maybe I want this to be along the y-axis, and it gives a nice straight linear dimension of the minimum distance between those two surfaces. All right. So that is all I had planned to show for today. I'll go ahead and turn this back over to Todd Trace.